I was on Twitter and one of my subscribers or one of my followers had tagged me in this particular post, and I was like, "What are you trying to say?" And then they tagged me in the post itself that came from People Magazine, in which they interviewed Robin Crawford. Now, if you don't know who Robin Crawford is, she was like the quote unquote best friend to Whitney Houston. Like, she was always there. It was to the point where you think that that was her bodyguard. But there were always rumors flying around that her and Whitney Houston were in some kind of intimate relationship back in the day. Now, those of you who follow, I guess you can say, celebrity news, you would know that those rumors flew around a lot back then. Now, back then I was very young. I was really young. Well, actually, when they were allegedly together, I wasn't even born yet. But all of this was before, Whitney really blew up, or or before Whitney got with Bobby Brown and married him. But there was always this thing hovering around, like, who is this Robin Crawford? Like, who is she? And they just said, I guess she was just Whitney Houston's friend, and that's how they framed it. Well, now Robin Crawford has been interviewed by People Magazine, and it says she has a book coming out in which she's going in depth, or pretty much putting it out there, that her and Whitney Houston did have a romantic relationship at one point back in the 80s. Now, back in the 80s, to be a part of the Alphabet Academy was to be extremely frowned upon. It wasn't nearly as socially accepted as it is today. Today is still not widely accepted, like at least in mass. But back then, you could forget it. Back then, that's when the whole being in the closet thing was really the thing back then, or being on the DL. That was really back what it was like back then. And if you were black, it was really frowned upon, because they saw homosexuality, or being a lesbian, or whatever you want to call it, as being mainly a white people thing. Like, they were the only ones, I guess you could say, were allowed to be out and free, if you want to call it that. But if you were black, that was wildly frowned upon, no matter if you were a man or a woman. So they just framed it as, based on what she's saying, as them just being best friends. But she came out and said that she was romantically involved with Whitney Houston. Now, I remember watching an interview that Sissy Houston did back around the time when Whitney had passed. And they asked her the question about Robin Crawford, and she pretty much like alluded to it, but she didn't come right out and say it. And then they had asked her, how would you feel if Whitney was a lesbian? And Sissy, as you all know, being a woman, I think she's from New Jersey, she didn't mince her words. She said if Whitney Houston was a lesbian, she would not tolerate it. And I think that interview might still be on YouTube somewhere. She basically said in so many words, she would not tolerate her daughter being a lesbian. Like, that was completely frowned upon. Like, she just would not have it. She didn't like Whitney being with Bobby Brown either, but she would rather her be with Bobby Brown than be a lesbian, in so many words, because she didn't like him either. That was no secret as well. And then I was reading through some of the comments under this, and they were Bobby even put in one of his books that Whitney was bisexual, and that if it wasn't for her family's interference and him getting married to her, that Robin not only would have been in a relationship with Whitney, but he feels she would have been a better fit to be with her intimately than being with him. So it's like a lot of stuff about this is coming out. But one of the main reasons I'm doing this video is because I find it very interesting that Robin Crawford is choosing now to put this out here, when she could have said all of this when Whitney was still alive. And I feel that, in my opinion, that is disrespectful to put out stuff like this, and the person who you're talking about is no longer here to confirm or deny what was, being said. A lot of people saying, well, we already knew this was old news and she didn't have to do this and everything like that. Right. Let's stick with the part where she didn't have to do this. And because, like, okay, you said it's old news, but at the end of the day, it doesn't look good for her, because you know what it looks like? It looks like a money grab. It looks like she's trying to not only get attention, but she's trying to make money off of Whitney Houston's memory. Because as we all know, Whitney Houston is definitely a legend. Though that voice will never, ever be duplicated. It'll be imitated, but let's be real here. Ain't nobody out here about to sing like no Whitney Houston, and that's just facts. Even on Whitney's worst day, she still sounded decent. So I really question the timing of this whole thing and what is Robyn Crawford's endgame. I've seen some people leave comments saying that she was usually shunned and she never really got a chance to speak her piece about it because she probably was looking out for Whitney's best interest and didn't want to ruin her career, which I could say that would be noble of her to do, because who knows, if she did say something back then that it could have possibly ruined Whitney's career or at least put a dent in it. But let me just be honest here. We're talking about a woman here who really lived her life on the edge, because like it was no secret that Whitney Houston was on drugs. Like there was no denying that she was hooked and addicted to drugs. And let me just, while we're talking about that right now, everybody claims that Bobby Brown was the one that got her hooked on drugs. That could not be more further from the truth. In that interview that Cissy Houston did where she said she would not tolerate Whitney being a lesbian, also interviewed was her brother Gary Houston, in which he said, and this was from his own mouth, that he was the one that put Whitney on drugs. He was the one that got her started on drugs. This was way before she even met Bobby Brown. As a matter of fact, Bobby Brown even said himself that he tried to get Whitney off that stuff, but she couldn't fight those demons. And as a matter of fact, she started to bring the demons toward him. So he started doing the hardcore drugs that she was doing, like the cocaine. Because I think the most Bobby ever did was just drink. He didn't do any hardcore drugs like crack or cocaine. That was Whitney doing that. So that whole thing of Bobby Brown did it. And see, the thing is, they had to make Bobby Brown the bad guy because they call him the bad boy of R&B. And he had a reputation, they had violence and stuff that used to surround him. And him being from Boston and whatnot. So they always had to make him out to be the bad guy. But to be honest, Whitney was the one that was putting him on that stuff. Don't believe me? Look at that Bobby Brown miniseries that came on last year. It'll show you some stuff. Like, I didn't know. Now I'm not going to sit here and say everything could be 100% accurate, but I'm just going off based on what it was. And I will hope that he didn't lie and put some stuff in there for dramatic effect. But I did not know, if this is true, that before Whitney and Bobby got married, the day of their wedding, that while she was supposed to be getting ready for her wedding, like, walk down the aisle, that while she's in her dress in the bathroom, she was doing a line of cocaine. I did not know that. I'm not saying if it is or if it is not true, but it's no lie that Whitney was definitely on something. But back to Robyn Crawford, I definitely question her motives here. Like, what is her end game? What is she trying? What is she trying to get out of this? Is it attention? It's definitely going to be money because she's coming out with a book. So she's definitely going to get sales from that. And that Oprah Winfrey and her carpet munching compadre Gayle King are going to be lining up, probably front and center, to try and interview her. And then now we're going to have to bring all of Whitney stuff back out in the open. See, this is the part that I don't like, because this is going to open up a brand new can of worms, because this is going to bring in new people to the fold who probably don't even know what this dynamic is as far as Robyn Crawford and Whitney Houston goes. People know who Whitney Houston is. Now people are going to know who Robyn Crawford is. And Robyn Crawford is going to be known as the person who allegedly had a intimate relationship with one of the best and talented people ever to grace the mic. And then they're going to drag Whitney back through the mud, and the woman's been deceased for almost 8 years. If anybody needs to be resting at eternal peace, it's that woman right there, because she went through hell and back and hell and back a few times over in her career. So when she passed away, while it was shocking mainly because of her age, it wasn't shocking because of what she had gone through in her career. And I feel that she definitely needs to be at peace. Robyn Crawford doing what she's doing right now, I don't care what it is. If she feels like she has to get something off her chest, I truly believe that this was a wrong move. If she wanted to say all of this, that what she wanted to say, she could have said it while Whitney was alive. Even towards what later on her career. If she didn't feel like wanting to talk about it when Whitney was in her prime, fine. Wait until she was later on in her career, while she was still alive, maybe while she wasn't doing anything, like not releasing any music. Then you could have said something then. But to wait 7, almost 8 years since her passing to do this, it also makes me wonder, was it somebody behind the scenes telling her to do this? Or, did she really act alone, or did she have an accomplice that's doing this? Because now it's like first it was Michael Jackson with this Leaving Neverland crap. And now you have Robyn Crawford with Whitney Houston coming up. I mean, out of all the entertainers, I think in modern history that we've had, especially black entertainers, for the males, it was Michael Jackson. And I think for the women, it was Whitney Houston. So now that they've drained with the Michael Jackson thing, unless they plan on going back to it, now they're bringing Whitney back into the fold. Like I said, if it has anybody who needs to rest eternally, it would be Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston, two of the biggest entertainers the black community has ever seen before the world got a chance to see who they were. In my humble, honest opinion. Because they went through a lot in their careers. More so on the personal side of things. Talking about their names being dragged through the mud. It was crazy. But sidebar, could you imagine what a duet would have sounded like with Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston? I just had to throw that in there. So this is just something I always want to know. But yeah, I definitely question Robyn Crawford's motives heavily, because she was always seen as a background type of person. Like, she was there, but you never knew that she was there unless the camera panned to her. And she was furniture. Let's put it that way. She was furniture. But I'm gonna let the rest of this be left up to y'all, because I'm curious to want to know what y'all think about this down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. I will talk to you in the next one.